Okay, good afternoon. Good to see you all. And I hope that you see me okay and you can hear me okay. And that this won't be, today won't be any technical difficulties. Usually that happens in Christian family more than this class. Okay, today we're going to talk about work and business ethics and work ethics. And as I prepared for this class today, the Lord led me to some other study that's, of course, on the topic, but it's expanded our lecture. And so I have more to give you than what you have in your syllabus. And even that which is in the syllabus, I'll need to explain. So we need God to bless our class, that we would have a biblical perspective on business and work and the ethical principles about that. So let's start with prayer. Manalangin tayo. Our Father in heaven, we praise you that you guide us in every area of our lives. Thank you for what you have taught us in your word regarding business ethics and work ethics. And Lord, we pray that you would illumine us and help us to learn things that are from your word. Lord, we pray that you would help us to, in our heart, receive them as truth and help us to, with our wills, submit to them, that we would be righteous in all of our ways and that we would help others also. And we pray this not just for ourselves, but most of all, that your name would be honored in the way that we work, in the way that we do business. We ask that you would help us then for your name's sake. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, so our topic, first of all, this first hour, is on business ethics. Proverbs 10, verse 22 says, "The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and he adds no sorrow with it." Let me remind you before we continue, please go to full screen and speaker view. And then when you see this PowerPoint, you can click on the show active speaker video. So the blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it, because we've done our money making or business ethically. So we don't need to be burdened with guilt and sorrow that we've displeased the Lord. And the Lord does make rich. So we don't have to depend upon wrong methods and unrighteous methods in order to make a living. Any legitimate occupation will prosper if it follows biblical principles regarding business ethics. Our first principle is about bribes. Bribes are wicked and pervert judgment. Bribes are wicked and pervert judgment. And we'll look one by one at each of these passages. First of all, Exodus 23:8. "And thou shalt take no gift, for the gift blinds the wise and perverts the words of the righteous." So it's talking about not taking a gift, because the gift blinds the wise and perverts the righteous, the words of the righteous. And this gift is referring to bribes. No bribes, because a bribe blinds eyes and it perverts righteousness. A bribe is to influence people to overlook standards and bend the rules. Bribes is a way to persuade somebody to overlook the standard and to bend the rules, break the rules. This word gift is not referring to giving rewards, like giving a reward for bringing the most visitors to church. That is not a bribe, that is a reward. A bribe is an illegal incentive to persuade someone to act in your favor. It's an illegal incentive to persuade someone to act in your favor. Proverbs 15:27. He that is greedy of gain troubles his own house, but he that hates gifts shall live. And the word gifts, of course, is again talking about bribes. He who hates bribes shall live. And the opposite is part A. He that is greedy of gain troubles his own house. So how do you put those two together? The phrase greedy of gain means illegally profiting. He that is illegally profiting troubles his own house. And when you connect that to the second part, bribes is illegally profiting. So giving bribes and taking bribes are illegal incentives to favor someone. Proverbs 17:23. A wicked man taketh a gift out of the bosom to pervert the ways of judgment. In verse 23 of Proverbs 17, is the wicked man here giving the bribe or receiving the bribe? Maybe someone can answer that for me. Is the wicked man here receiving the bribe or giving the bribe? So you have a 50-50 chance on this. Okay.
Both.
Well, both are wicked, but it's actually referring to the one receiving the bribe. He's taking the bribe. So he takes a bribe, and he who receives bribes is wicked. Why? Because his judgment is for sale. He's going to receive that bribe because he's willing to just determine or judge based upon money, based upon what you give him. So his character, his choices, his judgment is for sale. That is a wicked man. And of course, the one who gives it is also wicked. Proverbs 29:24 is the next passage. The king, by judgment, establishes the land, but he that receives gifts, bribes, overthrows it. So a ruler, a king, who receives bribes, overthrows it. So here's a third problem with bribes. Bribes corrupt your judgment, and corrupted judgment overthrows a nation. So we're seeing here, let's summarize, at least three problems with bribes. One, we saw that taking bribes is illegally profiting. Number two, bribes pervert, and that's the word corrupt, right judgment. And number three, corrupted judgment overthrows a nation. So that's a logical progression there. So that would make a good message, now that I think about it. What should we do instead of bribes? Number one, we should represent Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:20. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ. So a believer is an ambassador for Christ. How do you think Christ wants to be represented? What would Jesus Christ do? Would he give a bribe? Would he ask for a bribe? Um, of course not. So since we're an ambassador for Christ, in representing him, we don't take or give bribes. Secondly, instead of bribing somebody, in bribing a government official or customs or the DEPED, we continually go to the government. Luke 18, 2-5. And you remember this story? Here's a widow going to an unjust judge. In fact, a wicked judge who doesn't care about justice. But every day, she's going there. And again, she knocks on his door. And the next day, she knocks on his door. And she is continually going to him. And so what does he say? Verse 5. Yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her. I'll give her justice, lest by her continual coming, she weary me. So we have corrupt government officials in the Philippines and in America and everywhere. How do you deal with them? You continually go to them, and by God's grace, you wear them down. And they finally say, okay, I just want to get rid of you. I don't want to see your face anymore. So I'll give you the justice that you deserve. Number 3, restore anything taken by fraud. Luke 19, the next chapter, we see Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus was a crooked tax collector before he turned to Christ. And after he repented and turned to Christ, what did he say? That he's going to restore fourfold. Imagine that. All that he had taken beyond what was reasonable was fraud. And all that fraud money, he's going to pay it back times 4. That is clear evidence of salvation. And he did that because of Jesus Christ. Someone said that when Jesus is near, it's not hard to know what is right. When Jesus is near, it's not hard to know. It's not difficult to determine what is right. So draw near to Jesus, and he will help you to do what is right. Chat break. Any questions so far? Okay, let's ask Clarence. Would you read your question?
Okay po, sir. Can a tip be considered as bribe?
Okay. And my great answer is it depends. Of course, there's a lot of different kinds of tips, If someone does good service for you at like a restaurant, you give them a tip. But you're probably referring to the other kinds of tips, quote, tips, that they call it here sometimes in the Philippines, where, yeah, you are giving a bribe. So, a tip, quote unquote, that is given in order to change the decision of the judge so that he rules in your favor. That's a bribe. Or like, you're stopped by the MMDA and they're going to give you a ticket unless you give them, quote, a tip. In that kind of context, it's clearly a bribe that they would determine their judgment on the basis of whether you gave them money or not. That's, again, I think we've already learned that's not a right basis for making a decision. Righteousness, what is right or wrong, that's the issue. Let's see, Daniel, I think I need a little bit of specific explanation of what kind of life and death situation are you talking about? Can you give me a scenario there?
Like there's a story that my friend is talking about. We're talking about like the same topic as this one about bribes, it's wrong or not. And there's a time he said,
I can't clearly understand your words.
um, there, me and my friend, we were talking. We had a situation. We were talking about a topic like this, and uh, he asked, and he told me a story about the situation like that. His brother needed medicine, and his father had to go to had needed medicine for it's like the medicine for asthma, and it's really hard up in breathing. So his father rushed to the store, and it was like closing down, and he wanted to go by, but they said they're closed already, and he cannot open it's because of the rules. So his father so the clerk said that if you give me a 500 pesos, I will give you the medicine that your son needs. So in order for his father to get the medicine, like he had to give him the 500 so he could get that medicine. Is that considered still a wrong kind of bribe?
Okay. So as far as I still didn't completely get everything there because of maybe this audio, but uh, two things come to mind on that. First of all, getting medicine to help somebody that needs it, uh, I'm very sympathetic regarding that. There have been times where, thinking of my children or with my wife, I really needed medicine to help them. And I wasn't in I don't think I was in the situation you're describing, but there are times where it's a desperate need. However, my first point is that we must avoid the kind of ethics of the Jesuits where the end justifies the means. The end never justifies the means. And God does have a way of rescuing us in situations without having to do something that is beyond what is scriptural. God is a miracle working God. He answers prayer. And I don't think any of us should take that as oh, well, that's irrelevant. Well, the existence of God is all relevance. It makes he's relevant in any situation. So we can't discount that. I'm not exactly sure about the situation, but I know that there are times that somebody who is in charge can make exceptions. And I can say that because, I've done that many times as an administrator And there are some things that I can make an exception to the rule if the situation is warranted. And I don't take bribes for that. But the fact that he's asking for money, I would conclude that that's a bribe because he has initiated to ask for money. Okay, so some other good questions here, but let me go on and maybe we can get back to those later. Okay, our next topic on business ethics is about contracts. Contracts should be made and kept. Contracts should be made and kept. All right. Let's look at Matthew 5:37a. Well, I can just tell you what this says. Here, Jesus said, let your communication, let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay. So for a Christian, your word should be good without a contract. The saying, his word is as good as gold, should be true of Christians. But, Matthew 10, because people are sinners, and Christians are sinners, and you are tempted to sin, you need to be as wise as a serpent, Matthew 10:16. And therefore, being wise and recognizing the reality that we all have a sin nature, and we're all tempted to take advantage of one another, it's wise to have a contract for business dealings, even with other Christians. A contract helps avoid misunderstanding, temptation, unrighteousness, and disunity. Now, breaking a contract is a serious civil wrong. So you need to be very careful to read the contract carefully before you sign it. Including the small print. I think of the story of a lady here in the Philippines who was rushed into signing a contract for her husband's business, an advertising contract. And she hurriedly signed that, or was kind of rushed into signing it before she carefully read it. Later, she found out that she had committed them to pay 3,600 pesos every month. So carefully read that contract before you sign it. But you should keep your agreements, keep your contract. Let's look at Psalm 15, verse 4. I like Psalm 15. It's a small psalm, but has some very great truths about what a godly person is like, what a godly man is. Psalm 15, verse 4. In whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord. He that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. He makes a promise and he doesn't change. He keeps that promise even if it's going to hurt him. I think of examples where a missionary has promised to sell something to somebody else. And then after he promised to sell it to that person, another person offered a bigger amount, like 50% more. So what does the missionary do? Well, he says, I'm sorry, I wish I could take your 50% more you're offering me, but I already promised it to this first guy. That is an upright man. That's an ethical person. He swears to his own hurt and he doesn't change. Okay, but there is one exception. Matthew 14:9, Mark 6:26 describes Herod making a promise to give whatever this girl that had just danced before him, to give her whatever she wanted. And she asked for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Do not hesitate to break a sinful promise, a promise, an oath which forced you to do wrong. So maybe an example for us would be that we told somebody when they came to us for counseling, and that person, that counselee said, now before I tell you the problem, I want you to promise me that you won't tell anybody. And you foolishly say, yes, okay, I won't tell anybody. And then the counselee says something like, I killed somebody yesterday, or I'm pregnant, or whatever, I'm going to commit suicide tonight. Don't tell anybody. Well, you can't keep that promise. You've got to break your agreement. And if you agree to do something that forces you to sin. Okay, next topic is interest or usury. Interest can be very dangerous. Notice first, it's better not to borrow. Romans 13:8. Owe no man anything. It is a great joy to be without debt. And if you have not experienced that joy, it's because you've never been in debt. Those who have been in debt, especially deep debt, if they ever get out of that debt, it is like a day of, in fact, a week or a month of celebration, because debt is it's a burden that you wake up with, you carry with you throughout the day, you lay down and you sleep with that burden of debt on top of you. It's better not to borrow. Proverbs 22:7 and Psalm 37:21. Let's read those. Proverbs 22:7. Proverbs 22:7 says, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. That's one of the problems of borrowing. You become a servant. Psalm 37:21. The wicked borroweth and payeth not again, but the righteous showeth mercy and giveth. So, can I encourage you not to borrow? If you do borrow, you've got to pay back. If you don't repay it, according to this psalm, that you're in the category of the wicked. Basically, you have taken something that belongs to somebody else. Now, to borrow, in order to buy an appreciating item can be wise. An appreciating item is something that grows in value over time. For example, real estate. You borrow to buy real estate, and usually land appreciates or grows in value. But I would not encourage anyone to borrow to buy all those other items in the world that depreciate, like borrowing to buy an appliance or a car or a furniture or a smartphone. Borrowing to buy a smartphone is not smart. All right, next is point number 2, regarding charging interest. The Jews loaned to fellow Jews without interest. According to the Old Testament, a Jew could borrow if he was poor. In fact, they were to be willing to even give to their Jewish brethren. And I think that's the spirit of a Christian. A Christian loaning to other Christians should do so without interest, and in fact should be willing to give to that fellow Christian if that fellow Christian is poor and in need. And that is what is behind Psalm 15:5. I think in your syllabus it said Proverbs, but it's supposed to be Psalm 15:5. So we read already verse 4, right? He that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. Verse 5, he that putteth not out his money to usury. So he doesn't loan with interest, nor taketh reward against the innocent. He that doeth these things shall never be moved. So that is not saying that it is wrong to loan money to strangers at interest, but a Christian should really strongly consider loaning to a fellow Christian who is poor with no interest, or better, to give to him. So for those who are strangers or outsiders, charging some interest seems to be approved. In Matthew 25:27, Luke 19:23, both refers to interest without making it negative. So charging some interest to outsiders seems okay, but I would encourage you not to charge oppressive interest. Countries have laws limiting how much interest people can charge one another. And for me, I don't think buying something or borrowing at 20% interest from a 5-6 guy is really wise. I think that's foolish. So last statement regarding interest and borrowing. Someone said this: before borrowing money from a friend, decide which you need most. Did you catch that? Before borrowing from a friend, decide which one you need most. Because once you borrow from a friend, guess what? He's not going to be your friend. Chances are he's not going to be your friend anymore, because The borrower is servant to the lender. Once you borrow from somebody, that changes your relationship. In fact, in the last church that I pastored, we had so many problems with this that I called a church business meeting and I said, I'm not going to institute and I'm not going to propose a change to our constitution, but I want to propose to you a working policy that we not allow borrowing between church members. And they all agreed to that. I think partly because they knew, what happens. One church member borrows from another church member, then every time that church member sees the other church member, they think about the money that this guy owes me. And it changes your relationship. And if somebody doesn't pay on time, then the one who borrowed feels mejia and he stops coming to church, or the one who was the one who loaned, he gets upset that this guy hasn't paid him back, so he stops coming to church. And often neither of them come to church anymore. It's a big source of disunity and people leaving the church, allowing borrowing between members. Okay, chat break. Okay, Jan, let's start with your question since you were first. Would you read your question?
Which one, sir?
The first one.
What's the difference between borrowing and asking for a loan? And if they're the same, how do we do that when housing loans and car loans are sometimes required when purchasing them?
Okay. When you ask for a loan, you are borrowing money. And so, borrowing is a very general concept. So asking for a loan, that's really the same. So how do we do that when housing loans and car loans are sometimes required when purchasing them? Housing loan, I have no problem with because it's in that category of borrowing to buy an appreciating item can be wise. Usually real estate appreciates in value. And so that is not a problem. Of course, you have to be still wise about what the terms are. Car loans, that is less wise. And you notice I did not say that borrowing is prohibited in the Bible. It's better not to borrow. And obviously, if you want to buy a car, the best way to buy that car is to buy it outright, so, without borrowing. But of course, many people are not in that situation, so they need to borrow. But again, you have to consider a lot of factors. So it's to be avoided, but it's always to be paid back. That should be an ethical principle that we follow. We always pay what we borrow or return what we borrow. Okay. Since we're at it, I'll answer your other question. If adding interest in a loan is wrong, how does that translate in investments in stocks or bank savings? Well, no one said adding interest on a loan is wrong. the Jews were to lend to fellow Jews without interest. And I would encourage Christians to, when they're loaning to fellow Christians, to go by the same principle. But again, it's not commanded, it's just a good guideline. So adding interest in a loan is not wrong. But I would say that, if you charge like 30%, which does happen, then I think that should be categorized as oppression. The 5-6 guys, 20%, that's high enough. But to charge 30%, or to manipulate it so that, the 20% is due every 2 weeks or every week, that gets to the category of oppression. Okay, let me, a lot of great questions, but let's go on to the next. And that is copyright. Copyright indicates ownership. So don't steal. And you see in your syllabus, there's a lot of information there about copyright. Almost anything can be copyrighted. And again, copyright means that somebody owns that. And if you use it or you copy it, then you're stealing it. Because you're taking something that's really owned by somebody else. There is an exception to copyright law, and that's the fair use law. The fair use law, and you have a full explanation there, but the summary of it is this: you can copy up to 10% of copyrighted material if for nonprofit educational purposes. The law, that's part of the law as well. So under those conditions, you can copy up to 10% if it's not a complete unit, such as a chapter. Okay, now I have added one more important topic, one more important main point. Do business righteously and honestly. Proverbs 11, 3-4, and then this second set of passages. So I'd like us to look at Proverbs 11, verses 3 and 4. Do business righteously and honestly. And let me ask somebody to read this. Let's see. I see Jonathan Floor there. Would you read Proverbs 11, verses 3 and 4?
Proverbs 11, verses 3 and 4. The integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death.
Okay. So the first verse about integrity, it doesn't seem to be in a business context until you get to verse 4. You realize it is a business context. Riches profit not in the day of wrath. That's right after the words, the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. So this indicates that perverseness or crookedness includes being crooked in the way that you make a profit. And the contrast to crooked business dealings is verse 3a, integrity. Integrity shall guide the upright. Integrity has the idea of righteousness. Look at verse 4b, righteousness. So these verses 3 and 4 to go together. Integrity includes righteousness. Be righteous in business. So in business, integrity should guide. Integrity should guide how you do business. What is honest and righteous and true? Example, if you're selling a product, is what you say about the product true and honest? Are you hiding flaws? Are you not giving a true picture of what this product can do and cannot do? I remember, maybe I shared this before, the first car I bought in the Philippines. This was 1991. And it looked beautiful on the outside. New paint job, it was wonderful. But then I realized after I bought it that it had a problem. And the guy, he lied to me. He told me it didn't have problems. So that was unethical. Integrity is more interested in righteousness than in financial profit. But if you have integrity and do what's right in your business, God will bless. The second set of passages was Proverbs 11:1. So same chapter, verse 1. Then 16:11, 20, verse 10, and 23. And all of these are going to tell us something that's all the same. So let me read these. 11:1, a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. A just weight versus a false balance. 16:11, a just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are his work. Chapter 20, verse 10. Diverse weights and diverse measures. Okay, that means you have different weights, different measures. Both of them are alike abomination to the Lord. This is the guy, the vendor, that has in his bag, two weights that both say 1 kilogram. And one of those weights is actually 900 grams, not 1,000 grams. And he uses that when, someone is wanting to buy grain from him. But he's got another weight that's actually says 1 kilo, but it's actually 1.1, 1,100 grams. And that's what he uses when he's buying from somebody else. Both alike are abomination to the Lord. Verse 23, diverse weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. Okay, some truths here. When it talks about weights, measures, it's talking about what is the legal standard. And a righteous business follows the legal standard. And it tells us that God recognizes legal standards, that a kilo should be 1,000 grams, not 900. So rigged scales, tampered taximeters, cheating vendors, all of them are abomination to the Lord. Just like that word abomination is used also for adultery and homosexuality in Leviticus 18. Now, besides those legal standards of measurements, of scales and taximeters, there's also accounting standards that a business needs to follow. There are safety standards. There are pay standards that businesses are to follow that include things like, benefits like SSS and PhilHealth. There are legal standards of using receipts and paying taxes. And a righteous business conforms to all of those standards and fulfills their obligation. So Christian ethics includes being righteous in your business. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, so the only questions so far, let me see. Yeah, I guess the only question so far on this last one is, again, Jan's question. So is it integrity if you advertise the good functions of an object? The flaws of a product are not hidden, it's just that the perks are highlighted. Sure, you're not going to say, if it's a new product, theoretically it doesn't have flaws. It may have some things it can't do, but it's not flawed workmanship. So you would highlight the positive things about it. It's when sometimes salespeople, or even sometimes the way something is advertised, exaggerates. And I think if we've watched, if we've read, we realize that sometimes actually they're not just saying what it can do, but they're exaggerating what it can do. And that is false advertising, and that is unethical. Okay, and Eunice's question is a question that we're going to talk about second hour when we talk about work ethics. So let me go back and see if there's any previous questions. Okay, what about the credit card question? Let's see. Danielle, would you ask that question? Read that question.
How does the concept of not borrowing apply to when you have to use a credit card for something?
Okay. I have a credit card, and a credit card can be, it's just like the whole thing about interest and borrowing. It's not wrong, but it's very dangerous. And when you buy it, when you use a credit card, I never use a credit card unless I have money in the bank that will cover that. Some people, they're willing to use their credit card to buy something that they don't have all the money in the bank for, but they know they will put it in, deposit money into that account before the credit card balance comes due. And that's not what I do, because I think that's dangerous. And that's the point. To use a credit card to buy something and you're not sure where you're going to get the money, that is foolish. And that is why people get into debt, and they begin to burden their lives and also restrict how God can use them, because they are tied to a credit card debt. So using a credit card is not necessarily borrowing. It kind of depends upon your financial situation. Okay, so it's 4:55. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back at 5. Okay, I just restarted the recording, so now you can put your name in for second hour attendance. All right, oops. So our next topic is work ethics. Of course, this is closely related to business ethics, but there's a different emphasis here. So work ethics, and I've expanded this lesson more than the business ethics topic from what your syllabus has. Genesis 2. In Genesis 2, we see that God created man to work. He, in fact, gives man a job to do. And the rest of Scripture tells us how God wants us to work. So this lesson is about the Christian work ethic. Okay, first, employers. Employers must be fair with employees and customers and protect them from danger. And we'll talk about these 3 things: just wages, fair price for goods and services, and safe work conditions. So first, employers must be fair with their employees regarding their wages. The first reference there is actually a bad example. Laban in Genesis 31, it's actually Jacob who's describing Laban's treatment of him. That Laban changed his wages 10 times. Wow, what a rotten employer he was. Employers must pay employees fair wages. The wages they are due, and not change them without mutual agreement, without the employer and employee agreeing on that wage change. Let's look at Colossians 3, verse 1. That is definitely worth reading. Here is a key passage in the New Testament regarding work and business. Colossians 3, I'm sorry, it should be 4. Colossians 4, 1. And it says, "Masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that you also have a master in heaven." So clearly this applies to employers. Give to your employees what is just and equal, what is just and fair, knowing that you have a master in heaven. You know, the Lord is overseeing this. So this verse is commanding employers to treat their workers fairly and justly. Second was a fair price for goods and services. Genesis 25, 31 to 34, that is describing Jacob and Esau. So first of all, let me ask, can a business price its goods and services as high as it wants, especially if it has a monopoly on the market? A monopoly is when you have exclusive possession of a commodity or service. Like, let's say you're in the airport terminal, and airports are notorious for having high prices. And so we know that, that's part of the convenience. But what about this? What if, as has happened to me in the past, I've been waiting for my Cebu Pacific flight, already checked in, gone through security, and I'm now at the gate. And you can't leave once you're in the gate area. And then, there's a flight delay for an hour. Then it becomes 2 hours. And then it becomes 3 hours. And this happens. This has happened. So you're delayed like 4 hours in the gate, and the only, you have to buy the water. By this time, you're really thirsty, and you have no choice of what water you're going to buy. You've got to buy their water. Now, their price is big, but it's reasonable in a sense, convenience. But what if they said, well, to buy this water bottle, it's 500 pesos. I know you're dying of thirst and, you're dehydrating, but that doesn't matter. It's 500 pesos. That is really unfair. They're taking advantage, and that's kind of what Jacob did to Esau. Now, of course, Esau, he is the main one at fault in that passage, and we know that from verse 34. But still, Jacob took advantage of Esau. It's unethical because it's greedily taking advantage of someone who has no alternative. The third area here is safe work conditions. This is also an ethical obligation that an employer has. He is obligated to protect against safety hazards. Deuteronomy 22:8. Let's read that. And let me ask somebody to read here. Let's see. What about Missy? She's on top of my screen. Missy, you want to read Deuteronomy 22:8?
Deuteronomy 22:8. When thou buildest a new house, then thou shalt make a battlement for thy roof, that thou bring not blood upon thine house, if any man fall from thence.
Okay, so the owner was supposed to make a railing around the flat roof of his house so no one who's walking on the roof will fall off. So it's making the owner liable. It's making the owner obligated to protect against safety hazards. Examples in modern businesses would be exposed wiring, hazardous materials, erroneous safety procedures, malfunctioning equipment, or broken tools, slippery floors, dark stairways. All of these things, an employer is obligated to fix that, to make sure it's not a safety hazard for their employees. Okay, what about employees, naman? Let's talk about them. Employees, what is their ethical obligation? They must be diligent, faithful, loyal, respectful, and obedient. And that's in 3 categories. First of all, diligent. 2 Thessalonians 3:10-11, and Ephesians 4:28. Okay, 2 Thessalonians 3:10-11. I will read that. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now, of course, that's in the context of a church, but that can also happen in a workplace. A person not working at all, but he's a busybody. Busybody is someone who's looking into what everybody else is doing. So instead of doing their job, they kind of start to survey and wander around and see, what's this? What are you doing? Oh, that's good. And they kind of have a chat. And then they go to the next cubicle and they have a chat. And they find their way to where the water, drinking water is, and they have a chat with somebody who's there. So that's being a busybody, not really working. That is a lack of diligence. And God considers that a sin that needs to be disciplined. So God considers laziness, that's what it is, and idleness to be wrong, to be evil. Second passage was Ephesians 4:28. Here is the good side. Why is work good? Ephesians 4:28. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. Well, here's one of the blessings of working. By working, you can use any extra you have to help others, to express Christian charity. Working with your hands, that which is good. That also describes the creative aspect of work. God designed us, created us in his image, and part of our being in the image of God is creativity, being able to do something that is productive. So when we are diligent, we won't go there, but other passages like in Proverbs tell us that a diligent worker eventually becomes rich, not rich as in, Bill Gates rich, but at least rich as in having an excess over his needs, beyond his needs. And that's not sinful. It's not sinful to be rich. It's questionable to indulge in luxurious living without caring for others around you, to consume conspicuously, that's a bad testimony. That's wrong. To show off, that's what I mean by conspicuously, to show off your wealth. But becoming rich in itself is not sinful when it is a result of diligence, hard work, being frugal, not spending beyond what you should, and being a wise steward of your money. By the way, you know what is the number one way that Filipinos spend the extra money they have? You could probably guess this. Eating out, of course. It's the national pastime. And there's nothing wrong with eating out, some, but there's also a side where we need to be frugal so we can have more to give to others, to give to the Lord's work, so we can, and frugal so we can save for future needs. Okay, so diligence. The second one, as far as an employee ethical obligation, is to be faithful and loyal. These two are different, but you can tell how there's a connection between them. 1 Corinthians 4:2. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Faithful to a job, yes, but to be faithful to a job does involve a degree of loyalty, being loyal to your employer. Colossians 3:22. Let me read that one. Colossians 3:22. And you know, Ephesians and Colossians both have something about masters and about servants or employees. Colossians 3:22, servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. So you're to serve your boss not with eye service, but in sincerity, in singleness of heart. Okay, so the idea is that you're not just serving to look good. You're not just serving when he's looking. You know how it is. You know, when the boss is around, everybody looks diligent. When the boss walks out the room, then everybody starts to have playtime. That is not Christian work ethic. Instead, a Christian work ethic is singleness of heart. You are sincerely working and serving the company or your boss from the heart. Part of the idea of singleness of heart or sincerity does, again, connect to loyalty. When you are working for a company, an employee should not be secretly trying to work against the company. The employee should not be secretly helping the competition. That is disloyalty. However, the other side of the picture, this is not an absolute loyalty that hides violations by the company. If your employer, if your company is doing things wrong, not paying their taxes, cutting corners on legal standards, you know, what do you do? What if the boss says, just look the other way and you'll keep your job? Now that's pressure. You need that job. You know, what's going to happen to your family if you don't have that income anymore? We're going to answer that later when we talk about work relationships, but just hold on to that scenario. Let's go to Proverbs 25:13. Let's go back to faithfulness. And out of these three verses, it's Proverbs 25:13 that to me has the most picturesque image. Proverbs 25, verse 13. As the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him. For he refresheth the soul of his masters. Now, don't misunderstand that. Don't think that it's snowing during harvest time, and that's good. Actually, if it snowed in harvest time, that would be bad. What it's describing here is the snow that is in the mountains left over, and it melts and it comes down the mountains and it becomes a refreshing, cool stream that refreshes you during the warm weather, during harvest time. That refreshes those who are working and working in the hot weather. likewise should be a worker. It says here, a faithful messenger. Faithful messenger is someone, you give them a job to do, and they do it. And for anyone who is a master, an employer, they just love employees like that. Give a job to somebody, and you know that he's going to do the job. He's going to do the job. He's going to do it well, and he's going to do it on time. Everybody wants that kind of worker. That refreshes it makes the master's mind at ease. It gives him peace in his soul that the job's going to get done, and it's going to get done on time and get done well. That's what we need to be. We need to be reliable workers, faithful servants. Okay, the last thing here on our this slide is respectful obedience. Now that sounds strange in 2020. What? Respectful and obedient? Well, that's more a commentary on the world in which we live, because the Bible does clearly teach that. Ephesians 6, Colossians 3, those are the two main passages in the New Testament about how workers should work. And how should workers work? What should their attitude be? We need to take time to look at this because it's so significant here in the New Testament. Ephesians 6, verses 5 to 8. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters, according to the flesh, with fear and trembling. That's the idea of respect. In singleness of your heart, as unto Christ. Not with eye service as men pleasers, not just trying to be a man pleaser when the boss is looking, but here's Christian work ethic. As the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill doing service, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. So it doesn't matter what your job is. You can be a slave, someone who's bound. You can be free. You can be a doctor, a lawyer, a mason at the construction site. You could be a teacher. All of you, no matter what your job is, you are a servant of Christ if you do the will of God from the heart. And in this context, doing the will of God is obeying what your master tells you to do. That's God's will on the job. And that is why we are not Roman Catholics. The Roman Catholics think there's two different tiers. There are the clergy, and then there are those are the elite Christians, real servants of God, and then there are the laymen, the non-clergy, and there's second-class Christians. That's not the way it is. Everyone who is doing the will of God for their life, that is your calling. Martin Luther recovered that as part of the Protestant Reformation. There's not this two-tiered Christianity. Everybody is a servant of Christ who is doing God's will for their life. So every calling is sacred. And that's the perspective you need to have at your workplace. If you are doing God's will, then let me change that. The work you are doing is God's will. So your work is service for the Lord. you're serving the Lord by doing that work at LTO or the construction site or at the school or at the Palenque. You're serving the Lord there, and the Lord will reward you. Verse 8 says. Okay, chat break. Questions there? All right. A few questions here. Okay, let me ask Kimberly to read her question.
How can you be respectful if the employer or manager doesn't like you and treat you in a bad way?
Okay. I think that's a good question because that applies to so many areas of life. How do we give honor and respect to the government when the government is, let's say, abusing us? Or our parents, if they are mean to us? Or our employer, if they are, threatening us and harshly criticizing us all the time? Well, one thing that helps me with this is to make a distinction between that person's position and that person's actions. I may not, I don't honor and respect the abuse, the abusive actions or words of an employer. But if he is the authority that God has given me, if God has given me that job and wants me to work there, then God has established that owner or manager as my authority. And so I honor and respect him for the position that he has. That, okay, I don't like what he does, I don't like what he says, but in God's providence, he is my boss. He is my authority. And so I need to obey him. I should not talk about him behind his back, making fun of him or her. So that's my brief answer to that. Okay. Becca Castillo, would you want to read your question?
For example, you're a corporate spy, because this job was offered for me years back. So I was contemplating if I did the right thing. So it's a legitimate job. So what you have to do is you have to gather information. Of course, you're a spy. You're not supposed to tell. For example, you're gonna grade a hotel, or you're gonna grade a restaurant. So you're gonna pretend that you're gonna be a customer. So you're gonna gather every information without. Is it that stealing? Because your primary goal is to observe, but yes, to observe, but actually to find the strengths and the weaknesses of the competition, so that your company would be able to do some studies to improve theirs, and probably make its way up better than the competition. So is it unethical to do that without informing the people around you?
Okay. I'm glad you explained that, because I wasn't exactly sure what you were talking about here. But I think there's a difference if you are a customer than being an employee. What if you are let me use the example of a hotel. If a person is an employee of the hotel and he's actually working for the competition, then you're actually not, you are being disloyal and deceitful. And there's something unchristian about that. I guess that's obvious.
I mean,
but-
you're being hired by your own
Right.
hotel. You're gonna go to the competition's hotel to observe their strategies.
You're the customer.
You're gonna pretend that you're a customer and you're working for
Right.
your own hotel.
Right. Yeah, I got it. So where was I? So it's wrong if you are an employee under the second hotel and you're being disloyal to it. But if you are a customer that goes to that hotel, then actually you're not working for that second hotel. You're working for your first hotel, your only hotel. So it's just like, so there's a difference. You don't have a relationship. You're not under contract from the second hotel. And I say that because there are situations where an employee of another rival company is secretly hired by the other company to work and undermine and to find out the secrets, and you are really a spy in the full spy sense. You're working in the other army. But as a client, you know, that's different. Okay. Let me go to the third topic here, which is work relationships. From here on out, I think all of this is new. Some things I've added. There are two passages I want us to look at. And this is all about our relationships to our employer, to our employee, to customers. Do not follow the ways of an oppressor, and do not partner with dishonest business people. Proverbs 3:31. Proverbs 3:31. Envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. So don't follow the ways of the oppressor. Now I point this out because an oppressor could be a boss who is harsh with his employees or even with his customers. And we're not to follow that example. In fact, Ephesians 6:9 commands employers, Ephesians 6:9, and ye masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing threatening. Don't threaten your employees. Now, what happens sometimes is the way a boss treats employees, what sometimes happens is the employees start to treat other employees that are lower than them the same way, and maybe even treat customers the same way. So it's like a whole, toxic system that started with the employer. And the passage tells us, don't follow that example. If you have an employer like that, and someone brought up, what if, one of the questions, what if your boss is, harsh? the tendency would be for the employee to become harsh to those under him, those or under her. And you got to resist that. So the point is, and the opposite is to be respectful and kind to other employees, to customers, and to your employer, right? We learned this, to be respectful, to be kind. That is the New Testament ethical principle, to love our neighbors as ourselves. Proverbs 29:24. This is the answer to what if your boss says, just look the other way and you'll keep your job. Proverbs 29:24. Whoso is partner with a thief hateth his own soul. He heareth cursing and bewrayeth it not. Now let me explain this. The idea is, do not partner with dishonest business people. Don't be part of them. Why? Verse 24 says, you will hate your own soul. You will hurt your own soul. No matter how much money you make, if the business, if your boss is dishonest, then what's going to happen is you will become a part of that dishonesty. And no matter how much money you make, you will do spiritual damage to your soul. Now, why do I say you're going to become a part of it? Because of the last part of verse 24. He heareth cursing and bewrayeth it not. Part B is describing an investigation. Okay? It's describing an investigation of what is going on in this company. Is it dishonest or not? And this investigation makes people swear under oath that whether they know of any dishonesty. Now, if you're an employee in a dishonest business, what's going to happen is you're going to have to either leave or you will cover up that dishonesty. You'll pretend that everything's okay. Being part of a thieving business forces you to bewrayeth not. In other words, to not tell anybody. So working with dishonest people makes you a partner in dishonest business. Okay, let's go to the next topic. I've called this the necessity of work. Work is necessary to meet your needs. Emotional needs, physical needs, and familial needs. Okay, emotional needs. This might be new to us, but there is Genesis 2:15 and Genesis 1:28. Okay, in Genesis 2:15, God gave man the job to take care of the garden. He gave man work. And by the way, this is still paradise before sin comes. So work is a part of paradise. Work is not a result of sin. In fact, this is an indication that even though we don't know everything that's going to happen in heaven someday when we get there, it is doubtful that we're just going to be, sitting on clouds plucking harps forever. Probably there's going to be work, not toil by the sweat of our brow kind of work, but there will be creative activity for us to do because it's the way God designed us. And it's part of paradise. And Genesis 2:15 is the result of Genesis 1:28. God created man in his own image and to have dominion over the earth, to subdue the earth. And work is a part of how God designed us. So if we don't work, there's something that happens in our spirit and emotions. Work is what we're designed to do. If we don't work, we will not be fulfilled. It meets that emotional need. Secondly, letter B, God created man to work as part of our being physically satisfied. Proverbs 16:26. 16:26. He that laboreth, laboreth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him. In other words, his mouth is hungry and wants to eat. And how can you eat? Well, by working. Proverbs 12:11. 12:11. He that tilleth his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he that followeth vain persons is void of understanding. That is very interesting. Let's compare that to 28:19. If you want, you can keep a finger in 12:11. Compare that to 28:19. He that tilleth his land shall have plenty of bread, but he that followeth after vain persons shall have poverty enough. Very similar. What is it saying? You till your land, you work, and you'll be satisfied physically with bread. But if you follow vain persons, you're going to become poor. That's a foolish thing to do. What is vain persons? In this context of how to provide for your needs, a vain person includes somebody who promotes get rich quick schemes. Vain persons who promote get rich quick schemes, you're going to end in poverty. Financial stability doesn't come from winning the lotto. Financial stability comes from diligent work. Okay, third part of that is it meets your familial needs. And every single guy under the sound of my voice, please read Proverbs 24:27. Okay, let's look at it. Proverbs 24:27. Prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. Okay, what does that mean? Work to have financial stability before you get married and have a family. Really, building the house there, that is more figurative than literal. If you compare the way the word build is used, it's often used in a metaphorical sense of building your family, your home. Before you can do that, you've got to be financially stable through diligent work. Of course, let me also say that once you're married and have a family, don't prioritize your work over your family. Okay, I only have 5 minutes left, and I've got one more point to make. So let's look at that. Roman numeral 5. whether you are an employer, employee, self-employed, or unemployed, or Juan Tamad, a Christian work ethic is to work diligently. A lot in Proverbs about this. Proverbs 10 and Proverbs 21. Proverbs 10, verse 4 and 5. He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. Okay, a slack hand is somebody who works negligently, inattentively. You know someone like that? They're on the job, but they're not really focused. They're not really paying attention. They're not really doing their best. That's a slack hand. But the hand of the diligent maketh rich. Verse 5. He that gathereth in gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. Okay, gather in summer is wise, sleep in harvest is shameful. Okay, what does this mean? Verse 5 contrasts the lazy worker and the diligent worker by how they live, whether they live for the present or for the future. Okay, somebody who lives for the present, let me change that. Somebody who lives for the future, or prepares for the future, is wise. Even though it's still just summertime, he's working. Harvest hasn't come yet, but he's working, he's gathering. The wise are working to prepare for the future. In contrast, in you the lazy guy is living only for the present. You know, this is the kind of person who lives for the weekends, lives to make it through the day so he can really live and have fun at night. And he does the minimum at work. And that's why I am always very concerned about students who turn in the minimum, who do the minimum amount of work to pass. To me, that tells me that's a lazy student. And in the future, he's going to be a lazy church worker. And if he doesn't make it in the ministry, he's going to be a lazy worker because he's just trying to do the bare minimum to get by. And he's not preparing for the future by doing his best and getting everything he can, because what you're doing in school, that's your preparation for the rest of your life. Okay, last 21 verse 5. Very similar. Proverbs 21:5. The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of everyone that is hasty, only to want. Okay, the thoughts of the diligent means the diligent, they plan. They plan and prepare for the future. Same idea. But those that become poor is the person who is hasty. They are impulsive. They just kind of do what they want when they feel like it. You're going to be a poor person if you're controlled by your impulse, by doing what you want, instead of diligently sticking to the job. Okay, so I'll end with this slide just to summarize work ethic. Christians should be the best workers, right? Christians should be the best workers, working with wholeheartedness, diligence, and excellence, doing the best job we can. and working with faithfulness, honesty, and obedience. Okay, once again, we've run out of time for questions. A lot of great questions today. Thank you. I will answer those in the stream. And if you have more questions, just email me or private comment on the stream. Okay, so we are dismissed.
Thank you po.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Thank you, sir.